You're watching Honoring the Armor podcast, hosted by Coach Nikki M.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Honoring the Armor. This time we have a absolutely esteemed, most special guest, my BFF Lydia. Lydia is going to talk to us a little bit about her experience of the armor that mothers wear. As you all know, I have shared my journey, and I'll just give you just a quick little background on that. About 2 years ago, I read a book, y'all. And the book was really about people sharing their experiences of the things that they didn't talk about with their moms and that they wish they had talked about. So here I was reading this book and said to my mother one day, "Oh, I'm reading this book and it's so good and I really like it. I'm really enjoying it." And my mom, who has amazing armor, says, "Well, are there things that you and I don't talk about?" I jumped on her like she had a winning lottery ticket. I was like, well, yes. I mean, you would have thought I had a scroll to roll out. So I was like, well, I never knew this and I never knew that. And well, what about this? And what about that? My sister, who's 4 years older, had told me things, just about our family, about our history that I thought I had cataloged over the years. But then talking to my mother, I realized I had the facts mixed up. Some stuff I thought it was this, but it was that. It was that, but it was this. And so we spent probably about 2 hours on the phone, and I was just soaking it up like a sponge because my mother does not talk because her armor is in place. And so just that little opportunity, just I feel like it opened my world so much more. And then maybe a year later, maybe a couple months later, I had to go to Cincinnati to get my hair braided. And my husband couldn't go. And he said, "Why don't you take your mom?" And I was like, "Oh, that'll be nice. Like she could see her cousins." And so, yeah, I'll take her. And, because I was going to drive. And on the road, little did I know I would have a captive audience. So she started we were listening to music and the music was good and we were in the car. And she started talking about stuff about like her dating life when she was younger and this and that. And, I'm driving, y'all, trying to act like I'm not listening. Trying to act like because, if you seem.
had the tea.
I had the tea because, if you seem too interested, they clam up and they shut down. So I was like, "Oh, mommy, that's so funny." Okay. But on the inside, I am just joyous. Things she had never talked about people that she dated and experiences that she had and what she thought about this and what she thought about that. And it was 4 hours of bliss for me on that ride to Cincinnati. So that just really just drew up in me such a hunger that I already had to really know her more and to really know my mother as a person and as a woman and to know her story. And that got me in conversations with Lydia and with other women who also realized at some point, and we'll talk about when you realized it in your life, but who realized that they also didn't know their mothers as women and as people, right? And that they really didn't have that awareness, even, as fully adult women that we are, like, "Oh, I really don't know this about my mother. I really don't know her journey in this way or that way." So here we are. That got us to honoring the armor because it really is armor that should be honored, right? We're not here to criticize mothers or tear them down in any way. And at the same time, it was such a, I think, I won't say eye-opening, but a heart-opening realization for me. And even though I already had that like deep desire to fully know her, those little glimpses that she gave me just like made me hungry for more, right? I want to know you more and I want to know more about you. So that's, I think, for me, my story about why this is such an important conversation to have because I realize that it's not just me. It's so many daughters and sons out there who don't know their mothers and their fathers as people or as men and women. Why do you feel like this might be an important conversation for you, either for yourself or for other people?
Well, I like to say first, you're such a fantastic storyteller, and I think that you demonstrated why it's important. First of all, thanks for having me and for allowing me to share this platform with you. I think it's always an interesting conversation, and it just a lot of times brings more questions and more curiosity to me when I think about just who my mother is and who I am as a mother and how that ties together. So I remember watching an episode of Ayanla Fix My Life, which was like my show for a while.
That's everybody's auntie.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that she said that I'll never forget is that the greatest gift a mother can give her daughter is her story as a woman.
Yes.
And ever since I heard that, I was just like, two things. One, I would love that gift from my mother. And two, I have been in my mind packaging the gift for my daughters. Like, when am I going to give this? How do I give this to them? So it really has just been something that's been on my mind, like, since I heard it. And I think that this kind of ties into what you're doing and the journey that you have been on.
Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about when you were growing up and your experience of knowing your mother's story or of not knowing it. Did you feel like you had information about her, or you knew or saw her as a woman or a person growing up?
Not at all. I will say no, not at all. And I would say I used to spend a lot of time in my mother's room when I was not supposed to be. Looking back on it now, I think I spent the time in there because I was looking for her personhood.
Wow.
And so I would look at the books on her shelf and I would be like, oh, these are the books that she likes to read. And I would be in her jewelry box and I wonder who gave this to her, just really looking for those pieces. But ultimately, I couldn't put it together myself. And she really seemed to me, from what I can remember, like a person that just like was issued children, like she just,
Here.
these are your children. And honestly, I don't think, I'm trying to remember if I can even recall her as like a mother of like a baby. Like she always seemed like she was like the mother of children older than 6, So, and I think what was missing was that vulnerability and that softness and that kind of thing. So I did not have a picture of or an understanding of who my mother was as a person. Probably not until I went to college.
Okay.
And when I went to college and I was like out in the world and I was just starting to run into the issues that you run into when you're on your own. And my mother was the person that I called, which was different because I always used to call my dad and talk to my dad. But my dad was like, you're on your own, like you're out there now. And my mother was the one that gave me so much guidance and it was surprising to me because this is where she stepped in and she really started to encourage me and just to help me to shore myself up a little bit and to stand on my own 2 feet. So that is where I would say her personhood began for me.
Wow.
when I was in college.
I love hearing that when you were young and when I think about you in her room, just violating her possessions. Just
in her space.
It's just like you were trespassing. What came to mind for me is that I wasn't searching for my mother's personhood and her womanness that early. And I love knowing that you were. It did not dawn on me until I was like in my middle or late 20s when like the epiphany hit me that, oh, shoot, she was a person that at some point in her life had no thought of my existence, right? Yeah, I was up my middle or late 20s when I realized like my mother had a life before me, before all three of us. She was a woman. She probably had like dreams and ideas and stuff that had nothing to do with us. And then I started to look at her differently and like kind of like study her a little bit. Like, I wonder what she was thinking when I didn't exist, right? Like, what was she feeling? You know what I mean? But I didn't explore it probably until more about my late 30s. So it probably was a 10-year span that I started to really explore that. And I think for me, it didn't start young like it did for you because I was not like really exploring myself, right? And so now what has happened is the more like I really know myself really well now. And the more I know that, like the more I want to put more pieces together. And some of those pieces are inside my mother. Right.
Yeah, that is what makes it a whole story. And it makes so much sense when they start to add those pieces because you get to understand yourself. And some of this is just in me. It's in my blood. It's just who I am. And there isn't a why because that goes back generations, you know? So I think that sometimes I think moms underestimate the power of their story and underestimate the importance of it and how impactful it can be to give it.
I agree. So I think that's a good point. Let's talk a little bit about the why, right? Because I think no two whys are the same. But what are some common reasons you think that mothers specifically wear some of that armor?
Well, I think that that armor is made up of traumatic experiences sometimes.
For sure.
Poor choices and things like that. I think it's not exciting, especially when it's not something you've healed from, to go back and visit it, you know, and to talk about it. And it's hard to figure out, well, how can I tell this story if I don't tell that story? It's hard to kind of pick and choose what you're going to share. So it's easier, I think, sometimes just to shut it all up and to say, you know what, I got through a lot of things in general, and this is how I got through those things. But those things are a part of who you are now. You know, those experiences matter, and so I think that there's a lot of maybe shame, fear, and then also from my own perspective, like I think you don't mean to be on this perfect pedestal, but your children, you're on stage when you become a mom. They watch everything you do. So, you know, I gave you the analogy of a flashlight. You're their guide.
Right.
Who relies on a faulty flashlight? You know, who relies on a light that sometimes goes out? So I think that I know I do. I take it very seriously that my responsibility to guide my daughters and my sons, like I need to be whole. And so I do that work myself privately and forget sometimes that my daughter can benefit from watching me and understanding the work that I've done.
And I love that you mentioned where some of this armor bearing, right, comes from. And you mentioned fear. I think that's a big one. You mentioned shame. And that's a big one. In looking at those two things, I think what I hope mothers start to realize is because we are loved, like unconditionally, that's how we want to love them, right? And I think you and I have talked about this before when I was like, maybe somewhere around like 15, I started telling my mother everything. And my brother would be like, you so stupid. Why are you doing that? And I would just this is what happened. And this is what I said. And this is what they said. And the teacher's going to call you. And I would like come home because he was like, what if they don't call? I don't care. And that has not stopped. And some stuff she don't want to know about. I'm like, look, this is what it is, you know? And so I firmly believe I could rob a bank. And my mother would be like, oh, little girl, why you do that? But she would come visit me and put money in my books. You know what I mean? Like I firmly know I feel so secure in her love. Like I can be messy, I can be wrong. She's not gonna like support my wrongness. She's not gonna be like, I'm gonna help you hide away after you rob that bank. So she's not gonna support my wrong. She's gonna tell me I'm wrong, but she's not going to abandon me. And I'm not gonna be loved less by her. And I'm not gonna be like, shunned. And that's how we want to love them. Like I want to fully know her, and I want her to know that she is fully embraced, and that, there is no judgment of whatever decision you made and whatever didn't turn out right and why we had to live here instead of there and do this instead of that. Like there's no judgment for that. And there's such, like, I think grace and such beauty and treasure in her full story. And so what do you think, I guess, is there anything we can do as adult children to like really impress that upon them?
I don't know, because I think that it's the viewpoint is like self-driven. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that there's things that we do. Well, sometimes kids are rough and they're cruel and they do say some things where you're like, that's why I don't tell you nothing, But I think overall, I think it's just maybe knowing how to be vulnerable with your child, knowing how to be, and culturally that's a practice that is not common. So it's a new thing to show your vulnerability to your children in that way, and to trust that they're going to be gracious and they're going to take care of it. So I think that that's just something that has to be practiced and demonstrated. And if you do it one time, and you do it again, and it starts to create like a pattern where they can start to rest and trust in that a little bit more. But the first thing sometimes is just to ask in the first place. I know we spend a lot of time wondering, but I don't know too many women that just straight up say, Mom, like, tell me about your story. Tell me like who you were before you were mom. And so, and just give them the opportunity, give them the opportunity. I gave my mom a journal that I hope that she, the stories of my mother or something like that. And I don't know if she's writing in it or not. And if she is, I probably am not going to see that until she's gone, but a part of me just wants so badly to know that she is writing everything that she's ever thought, that she's ever experienced in that book. And I am eagerly waiting to read it and to know it.
Now, because you gave your mama that journal, I got that journal, as you know, from my mama. I do not have your patience. So I did, I think I worked on her for like 2 months, right? Leading up to Christmas, because she comes to spend Christmas with us. And I think I started like around like probably like October. And then I would say something every like couple weeks, and then November. And then I waited till after Thanksgiving. I was like, yeah, so you know how many days you're going to stay when you come, and, make sure you pack your stuff. And do you need new Christmas pajamas this year? And make sure you bring that journal. Like I was like trying to slide that in there. Like, make sure you bring that journal. And she did bring it. And it was so special. I don't know that special covers it. We're going to have to think of a better word than special. The way she went about it, because, my mother is not, bless her heart, she's not gentle. She was like, here. She shoves it at me. And don't ask me any questions. And, I lied. I was like, okay, I won't.
She know you got questions. Nicole gonna ask a question.
And I think it might have been, and we had Christmas dinner, and then everybody was asleep. My husband was asleep. My mother was asleep. And I made some little hot chocolate, and I just snuggled myself in bed with that journal and just was in awe. And I feel like I just took my time and thought about the things that she had written, because, takes you through different periods of your life. I mean, the early years, the teen years, high school, and I love the questions and the way that it's structured. And I think I went through it twice before I gave it back, and then I wrote her a little thank you note and told her just what a treasure it was and how much I loved her so much. And I left it on her nightstand. And then the next morning I asked her questions and she was like, I thought I said I said, I know, but just like answer these 3. Like I just have these 3 questions. So it really is, it's a gift for them to not just share their stories and who they are as people and as women, but it's like a treasure. It's a whole treasure box. It's more than a gift. If somebody gives you a gift, that could be one thing, but when you give me a treasure, like I can't even see the bottom of the box. Like that's a lot. So I really appreciated that you hit me to that journal. That was good. Let's talk a little bit about, because you mentioned 2 really important things. You mentioned that culturally, like this is very typical from a cultural standpoint. And you talked about the pedestal that parents sometimes find themselves on. So we know that there are some societal and cultural, I'm just going to say pressures, right, behind that. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I remember facilitating like a parent Bible-based group a couple years ago, and it was like 10 things we were reading a book, and it was like 10 things great parents do, or 10 things parents shouldn't do, or something like that. And one of the things that stood out to me from that book was to take yourself off the pedestal. And so I just really meditated on that concept for a while. And at the time, like I only had 2 kids at that time. So I was like, what pedestal? Like I'm not on a pedestal. I'm just a great mom. So, but what it was referring to is the fact that your children put you there because they don't know the mistakes that you make, and because parents in general, most parents are very intentional about wanting to do everything right.
Yeah.
So when you feel like you haven't made any mistakes, you did everything right, and what you're really demonstrating to your children is that mommy and daddy don't make any mistakes. We just help you correct yours,
Wow.
So to start to own the mistakes that you're making and start to own just the places where you just don't know, this is the best that I can do, or I don't have an answer, but we can find out together. Or, you know what, I didn't do that right, and maybe next time I'll do it a different way. I should not have snapped at you. I should not have yelled at you. Maybe I should have listened a little bit longer. Giving yourself grace and demonstrating that to your children goes such a long way. And I think I always say moms and dads, but society will definitely gear that and shine the light more so on mom. Your mother didn't teach you better. Your mother didn't tell you this. Why didn't your mother, show you how to do this or that? And so the societal pressure, along with just the fact that, you want to be a good mom, I think it is so important to kind of take a step back and to say, I don't have to bend and fold under this.
Right.
I can be my whole person, faults and all, because this child was assigned to me, was given to me as a gift. And I have everything that I need for that child. I have everything that I need. I'm already equipped. So I think that is just a level of grace. It's a way to extend it to yourself and then demonstrate it for your children. And early on, I think is super important, because that is where your personhood starts to come in.
That is so powerful. Can you imagine the, I guess, depressurizing that would happen if parents were really able to give themselves that gift of, I'm going to take myself off this pedestal. Maybe I put myself there. Maybe I did. Maybe society put me there. But, I'm going to climb on down so that I can be my authentic self at all times and give that gift of my authentic self to my kids. Like, you would just be able to decompress so much if you were just able to do that and not, what does Brene Brown call it? The gifts of imperfection, right? And not have to just always be like striving. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a vulnerability. Like I said, children can take that and twist it and turn it and make it something like, well, why would I listen to you? You didn't even graduate high school, or why would I, So, but it's a wonderful opportunity to practice respect for other people's journeys and for them to understand that your journey will look like whatever your journey is going to look like, and that it doesn't have to look like perfection for you to still experience success.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit. We're going to shift gears. Let's talk about because you're not just someone's daughter, right? You're also a mom. Let's talk about whether or not you feel like you're showing up armored with your children. How do you think you're showing up?
I definitely think I am, and I think it's surprising to me how armored I am. Like it's not intentional. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to make sure I brace myself for this. I think, especially for my oldest daughter, she's 13 years old, and we're like going through a thing now. 13 is something different. And there are things that she has said to me, like, why didn't you tell me that you have like anxiety about stuff? And I was thinking to myself, why would I tell you that? Like, what are you talking about? And she does go through my things, and I cannot stand it. And I'm really in a space right now where I'm trying to empathize with her, because I know what she's looking for, and open myself up to share that part of me with her. And it is a struggle because I want to remain mom. I want to keep that authority. And there's a part of me that feels like if I start talking too much to her, she's going to think we're friends or something, like if I start opening myself up a little bit, she's going to start talking to me about things that I clearly just know is no, know? So I have not found, I think, a good balance yet with that. And I think it's interesting because my boys absolutely see me as a person, as somebody to care for, as somebody that has bad days. Like they just see it and they accept it, and they're just like, Mom's having a day. You want me to make you some tea? You want,
That's fascinating. What do you think the difference is? Because she is the oldest. Is this just a gender difference? But what is the difference, do you think?
Honestly, I think just the relationships between moms and daughters and moms and sons are just different. Yeah. I think they're just different. I will say that I spend more time teaching my daughters and instructing them, and like being an example, demonstrating for them. I spend for my sons more time expressing love and acceptance and just encouragement. And I think from my perspective, I feel like I'm giving them the thing that only I can give them, Wow. So the world is going to be hard on my girls. The standards are going to be high. You got to shore yourself up. You got to make sure that those boots are tight, And for my boys, I think my biggest concern is not knowing how to be loved and not knowing how to love.
Wow.
So I spend a lot of time doing that. So and there's holes all in this. So if you're listening, don't be like judgy. I'm just,
This is a judgment-free zone.
yes, don't be, this is just what I see right now and
Uh-huh.
what's on my heart and what I feel like the most worried about as a mom when I'm thinking about what do my children need
Yeah.
from me. Those are the things that I think about. So when I look at my girls and that kind of things, stories later, you got to be able to be out here, standing on your own 2 feet and so that you don't fall for anything, those are my concerns for them. So I do think that they miss out on that vulnerability and that softness and just the part of me that their dad fell in love with, just that part of me. So I don't know. It's a struggle and it's definitely something that I am figuring out. And the one thing that's so interesting is that you can't figure that out on your own. Your kids help you
Right.
and guide you to where you need to be. So her asking me those questions, why didn't you tell me this? Or I want to know that or whatever, And I do, to be clear, I absolutely give her the stories of my life.
Okay.
I absolutely do. Even the mistakes that I've made, but I give them to her as a point. Not like
this is a teachable moment.
this is a teachable moment. Let me give you an example of why this is important.
This is what happened to me in high school.
Right,
This is why you shouldn't be doing that like that.
Right. It's to a point, it's to make a point. It's not
Right.
like, this is how I grew, I was like, when I was in school, this is what we were doing. So, and I can tell she files those stories away. And they've come out in different ways where I was like, that is not why I told you that, that is not why I shared that with you. So it's a journey.
I think, what did you say that you spend more time teaching your girls and then your sons kind of get that softness and that vulnerability? What does that phrase say that mothers raise daughters and mother sons?
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You're like, I fell right into that. That's what I'm doing.
That's what I'm doing. I have both hands on I do. And I do think that, there's that very natural love that you just always have been looking for. You look for it in your husband, you look for it from your parents, but your sons just have it. They just have it and they see you and they love you. That's an unconditional love. My daughters, I do not feel like love me unconditionally. It really do. I was telling you the other day, A wrote me a hate letter because I told her she has to clean up her room before, I have to earn it from these girls. I really do. And I know that they love me. I know that they do, but that expression of love, they make you work a little bit harder. But I mean, I could be laid out on the couch and haven't made a meal in 4 days. And my boys will just be like, what's the matter? Mom, are you going to feel better? The girls be like, get yourself together. Well, you've been laying here for 4 days,
Oh, I love that. But you know what? She wrote a whole letter.
She wrote a whole letter.
We should be focused on, look at how well she's doing.
She's 5.
She wrote a whole letter to express herself. What do you think will be some, and not for you and your children, but as we think about just the journey of parenting, and as we sit here fully grown adult children today, what are some, do you think, some outcomes of the dynamic and the relationship between parents and their children if you live your whole life and your parent never sheds that armor? What do you think are some outcomes of that?
Well, I think that you have to kind of stumble through some things. You have to stumble through some things. I say all the time to my mom, I wish I would have known her as a person earlier, because the things that she shared with me, the guidance that she tried to give me early on, I feel like I would have received it a little bit better and I would have had a little more compassion for the choices that she made for me and with me. Because, when you hear, that your mother loved you more than anything in the world and that kind of thing, I don't think that you can really quantify that or measure that just from the statement. But when they trust you with their person, I think that you start to see how deep their love is for you, and then also how you have impacted their life.
Yeah.
If they never shed their armor, you never really get to see that, and so you just assume that your parent loved you because they're your parent, and and that's how they show love, and that's just, I know that they love me even though they never say it, and I know that they love me even though they may never show it. But I think when that's what you're left with if they never shed that armor.
And I like when you said that, when you get to like an understanding of it, because I think I don't know that I noticed the armor when I was younger, and I talked about that. But I think there's a perception that you have as a child, like, oh, that's just the way dad is. That's just the way mom is. But then once you're like adult, I'm not talking about 18. I mean like all the way real grown. There's a difference when they are still kind of armored and withholding themselves from you. And I think a little bit of that knowing the why does allow you to have so much more empathy and grace and compassion and be less demanding about it, right? And so I think that having that why as an adult, and maybe even a little bit of them shedding a little bit of it, is so helpful to your like wholeness, as we talked about, right? And you coming fully into your own.
And I think, like, thinking about my mother, there are some things that I would feel probably just not good about because I know that some of those pieces of armor need to stay in place for her to stay together.
For sure.
And I would feel terrible if I started picking at and pulling apart and picking at, and then she just like fell to pieces. I would be like, oh, look what I've done, you know? So it's not for me to know how that armor is put together or even how it's assembled, everybody's is different. And so whatever she gives me, I trust that is something that she could afford to give me.
Yeah.
There are pieces and parts that maybe she can't afford to open that box. She can't afford to go there. Just mentally and emotionally, she's just not in a place to be able to put it back. So I have a lot of respect for whatever she extends. And I've had my moments where I've been a little bit more demanding, because I feel like you can give more, but also very grateful for however she pushes herself and however she chooses to show up. And my mom is really, I think, she's skillful in the way that, because it's never the way that I thought that I was going to get it. It's never a way where she's going to sit down and have a conversation with me. It's never like that. It'll be like, how is the weather? What are you doing today? I was thinking, and then it's in a moment where I'm in a rush. I'm trying to, all right, Mom, that's great. And then she just starts laying out this story. And I'm like, oh, I want to listen to this. I want to hear this. So I take it however I can get it and wherever it comes. And in the moments that she feels open, I put everything aside because I understand that you might not hear another piece of this for months.
Right. You got to get her in a car, girl. Take her on a road trip.
I'm trying.
Captive audience. She might just start saying some stuff, and you just got to, because you're driving, you can't write it down. You got to memorize it. Just store it. What would you offer people who, we have the journal, right? That's a big step and a big start. And I'm so, just so thankful to my mother that she trusted me and started filling out that journal and had the courage to just, fill in some stuff. What would you say to people who are like, well, now that I've been thinking about this, I really do want to start dismantling my armor maybe a little and be more connected to my children. What would you say might be one thing that they could do?
I think it's really being honest with yourself in each moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am a advocate for therapy now. I wasn't
Yay.
always now, but it has been very helpful. And one of the first assignments that I got was to like sit in feelings. And I was like,
Yes.
that's ridiculous. I don't even know what that even looks like. And so for, 2 weeks, I realized that I feel a lot of things that I
Yes.
just rush through.
Mm-hmm.
And so sitting in a feeling means I'm sitting here and I'm naming that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave me that little feelings wheel that is just my best friend. I said I was going to get a little keychain and gift that feelings wheel because it allowed me to name the feeling and to identify and give myself, like, acknowledge that I was feeling it. So for parents, like, every day you feel things. You feel worry, you feel concern, you feel pride, and there's just so many things that you feel. So maybe just like naming the feeling that you're feeling in the moment and sharing that. You know what? Mommy feels so worried today
Mm-hmm.
about whatever, like your attitude or the way you're carrying yourself today. It just seems like you're just not yourself. I'm worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes you a person now. And
Yes.
it's not about, I don't like your attitude, fix it. You
Right,
disturbing the
right.
peace in here, but I am, why are you feeling like that? Your feelings impact me. I'm a person,
Yes.
And so acknowledging your feelings, like my daughter had said, why didn't you tell me that you get anxiety? I didn't realize that was something that she felt.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that she didn't wanted to know is because she asked me months after she asked me this question. Why didn't you tell me that you have anxiety? Months later, she randomly said to me, Mommy, what do you do when you're anxious?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do you get anxious? Like all of a sudden, I'm like, let me help you. You know what I mean? And I helped her by telling her what I do,
Yes.
but that was not something that she was going to come to me and say, I feel anxious sometimes. What should I do?
So sharing yourself
Mm-hmm.
with her, a piece of your story, see how that came full circle
Mm-hmm.
to building better connection between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I want to thank you so much
Thank you
for
having
joining me on this journey. Now, I'm not going to let you go yet.
Okay.
We're going to do a couple rapid reflections
Okay.
before you go. You're going to finish this sentence.
Okay.
Try to do it in 3 to 5 words.
Okay.
The mother I used to be thought
that there was a reason for everything.
Mm-hmm. The mother I am now knows
That some things just are.
That's right. The woman that I used to be thought
That's a hard one. Woman I used to be thought that I had to earn everything that I had.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
The woman that I am now knows
That I am enough. Mm-hmm.
that's it. Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
Okay, lastly. Mother is another word for, and you can't say love.
Mother is another word for light.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This was
right.
great. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I'm proud of you. Thank you. All right. This is another episode of Honoring the Armor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for watching Honoring the Armor podcast. We're releasing new episodes every other week. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss out.